On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 213. The resolution is adopted.
For only the second time in American history, the House has impeached a sitting cabinet secretary. The House impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas last night in its second try. It passed by just one vote, with 3 Republicans voting no. And now it moves to the Senate, where already some Republicans are openly skeptical of holding an impeachment trial. And don't forget, while this vote focused on Mayorkas' handling of border policy, House Republicans essentially just sunk the Senate's bipartisan border bill. And joining us now, NBC's Julie Surkin on Capitol Hill and NBC's David Noriega covering the border from San Diego for us. Julie, President Biden blasted this impeachment vote as a blatant act of unconstitutional partisanship that has targeted an honorable public servant. So what happens next, and what are we hearing now from senators?
It's not just Democrats and President Biden that are blasting this as a partisan exercise, as a sham, as a waste of time. It's also Senate Republicans who are, some of them at least, dismissing this already publicly, saying the House should be focused on taking up border security, including that bipartisan package that they helped sink last week, instead of impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas for something that is essentially dead on arrival in the Senate. I want to read you a quote from one of those Republican senators, Kevin Cramer. He's a conservative from North Dakota. This isn't a moderate Republican. He said, quote, "It's obviously dead on arrival. I mean, it's the worst, dumbest exercise in use of time in a time-constrained environment." And what happens next in terms of the steps here practically, the Senate is out on recess for the next week and a half. When they're back, the House impeachment managers will deliver these articles of impeachment. There are 2 of them. Then Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will begin this trial, but they could move to dismiss it very quickly with just a simple majority. We'll see what happens next on that.
David, the House impeached Mayorkas because they said he wasn't enforcing border laws. You're at the border. What is the latest on the situation there?
Yeah, Anna, good morning. So I'm in San Diego, which is one of a couple of Border Patrol sectors where authorities have been apprehending a pretty substantially rising number of migrants in the last few weeks. That said, the numbers are still significantly down from where they were in December. But let me show you. Behind me, you can see there's a group of about 20 or so migrants who are waiting to be processed by Border Patrol. They're on the other side of this fence. In an area that's actually in between 2 border fences. All of that is U.S. soil, and it's an area that the Border Patrol has been using as a kind of de facto open-air detention site to hold people until they take them to actual holding cells to be processed. This particular group pretty much spent the whole night here, and I want to say it was a very cold night. It almost got down to the 30s. Advocates here on this side of the border say that the Border Patrol should be meeting these people's basic needs while they wait in the open air, giving them shelter, food, water. It's volunteers instead who are kind of filling that gap and giving those people, for example, some of the Mylar blankets that they now have as of this morning in order to keep warm. I just want to say, Anna, what we're seeing today, migrants crossing the border illegally in order to turn themselves into Border Patrol and enter the legal asylum process, that's not new. That was happening under Trump. It was happening under Obama. The numbers are up. However, the numbers are up because you have to consider that globally, we have a Border Patrol vehicle behind us, probably on its way to pick up these migrants. According to the UN and other international bodies, we're seeing an unprecedented era of global migration. What's happening here on the U.S.-Mexico border is one small part of that global picture, which involves many tens or hundreds of millions of people. Anna?
And so what can be done? Because clearly there is a situation that's unsustainable for the U.S. officials who are, in charge of processing all of these people who want to come into the U.S. David, we mentioned the Republican opposition that tanked the bipartisan border bill that would have added a lot of resources to border security. So where does that funding stand now?
So my colleague Julia Ainsley has done some reporting that shows that the failure of the Senate border bill could not only not result in new funding, but could actually lead to a funding shortfall. That would obviously create operational problems for CBP on the ground in terms of managing these waves of migration that are arriving at different parts of the border. There are different schools of thought about what can be done about this, right? One is that the resources could be put into sort of expanding and organizing the asylum process to make it so that it is not as chaotic and as disorganized as we've seen it become. The other school of thought is a more sort of enforcement-oriented, or even what was attempted in the border bill, trying to find ways to effectively shut down the asylum process so that the people, like the people that you see behind me, don't have an opportunity to enter into a legal immigration process once they cross the border illegally. Anna?
All right, David Noriega, Julie Surkin, thank you both so much for the reporting.